Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to Do Station with yet another video. I hope you are good, enjoying and learning as well. And my efforts are helping you guys. We are learning health and safety in easy manner from beginner to expert level, and we are covering our module 4, which is hazard identification and risk assessment. So today is the fifth part. So in the today's video, very important topics we will start understanding the how to implement risk assessment practically. We will look into the 5 steps of risk assessment, and we will understand first 2 steps: hazard identification and who might be harmed. Today we will cover what are the methods or techniques we can use to identify the hazards, and then which type of hazards are difficult to identify or maybe hidden or we can miss them. Then we will look into the hazard types of hazard which materialize with the passage of time after very long time. And then we will do some exercises, scenario-based exercises to understand or implement how to identify the hazards. So we can practice them. Then in the second step, we will understand who might be harmed or what are the implications of the hazard we have identified on our organization. And then how we decide which hazards we have to control or consider and which are not relevant to us. So these are very interesting topics we will understand today. So let's start them. Welcome to presentation, everyone. We are covering our module hazard identification and risk assessment HIRA process. It is a part fifth in which we will continue understanding the implementation of the risk assessment. Module guide. Our module is hazard identification and risk assessment HIRA process, which is proactive approach to effectively identify potential hazards, then evaluating their risks, and then putting in suitable controls to avoid any sort of harm, potential harm. So in today's topic, we will learn the 5 steps of the risk assessment. First 2 steps, we will understand thoroughly identification of the hazard and who might be harmed. And during this, we will understand what are the techniques or methods we can use to identify all the hazards, and then why some hazards are difficult to identify or we may miss them, and what are the hazards which take a very long time to materialize, so how we handle them. And then we will do some exercises scenario based to practice the hazard identification process. And then we will look into the implications of the hazards on our organizations, on our people, business or environment. Key topics are 5 steps of risk assessment, methods of hazard identification, why we may fail to address few hazards, which hazards take long time to materialize. Then exercise, name construction site hazards and their harms. Then exercise 2, name office hazards and their harms. And then who might be harmed and how. Learning outcomes. By the end of module, you will know what are the 5 steps of risk assessment and hazard identification, how we do it, what are the techniques or method we use to identify the hazards, and some hand-on practice on the hazard identification process. Then who might be harmed, you will have a good understanding about to whom these hazards might be harmful, including people, environment, and business. Steps of risk assessment. Risk assessment is a systematic process. There are steps in sequence that let us or enable us to effectively identify all the potential hazards and then evaluate their risks and then put in the suitable control measures so we can avoid any harmful impacts of these hazards on our business, people, or environment. And this process has 5 steps. 5 steps of risk assessment include identification of the hazard, then decide or estimation of who might be harmed and how, then evaluation of the risk and introduction of the suitable control measures, and then recording of the significant findings, and then review process as per the change or validity. Identify the hazard. First step of risk assessment process, very important one. Hazard is any source of potential harm that can harm us, our people, business, or environment. And the process of identifying them or finding them out is called hazard identification process. If we will find all the hazards, obviously, then we can put in the control measures or we can control them so we can ensure that our people, business, and environment is safe. Next, which hazards are difficult to detect and we may miss? So thought-provoking question, you can test your current knowledge, stop the video, think of the answer. Which hazards are difficult to identify? Let's move. So those hazards that we cannot feel using our sight, smell, or taste senses are difficult to identify because we cannot see them, we cannot smell them, we cannot taste them. So maybe we can ignore them if we do not have proper understanding how they exist. So like carbon monoxide gas, then there are other gases that can be very harmful. Then other hazards which are condition based or emerge from the changing conditions or circumstances, like water boils at 100 degrees centigrade, or hazardous chemical which are reactive. So if they combine, then they can be very dangerous for us. They can cause fires, explosions, or release of toxic or dangerous substances, gases, etc. So those hazards are difficult to detect. Effective approach to identify how to make our approach effective. So visual inspections is not sufficient. So always break down your activity steps or of the activity or process or even equipment you are using, whatever the steps you are using. Break down the activity into the steps, then identify the hazard attached or belongs to each step. And obviously, you can use the specialized knowledge experts with the specialized knowledge like mechanical energy related, electrical energy or chemical energy related thing. So you can engage the experts related to those who have those specialized knowledge. So they may help you in identification of the hazards. Sources of information or reference that can be utilized can be valuable for in hazard identification. So internal sources, there are external sources. Let's first look into the internal sources of. So employees' reports or feedbacks can be very valuable for you. As employees or workers are in better position, they are facing the hazards, doing the performing the activities. So they are better aware of the situations or circumstances. So their feedback can be very valuable in the hazard identification. Then near miss incidents, ill health stats, you can get information about which factors are causing trouble for you or you need to address. Then other historical data like investigations reports, incident investigation reports, lessons learned. So you can utilize them to identify. Then monitoring reports, you are doing inspections and risk assessments. So you can utilize them to find out which factors you need to address. Then maintenance records, especially the repair or maintenance of your equipments. So you can find which factors, which conditions or circumstances you need to address. Then trends, if you are doing the trends and pattern analysis, so this can be very useful for you. It will give you the idea which types of hazards are happening and what is the frequency and in which circumstances or conditions they more frequently occur. Then training requires, especially the specialized training related to your some heavy equipments or hazardous substances handling. So in these trainings, they identify the potential hazards or sources of hazards. So these are some internal sources that can be valuable in hazard identification. Then there are external sources of information or reference which can be used or which can be valuable during the hazard identification. Regulatory bodies, you can get all the information from the regulatory bodies related to your business, especially to meet the legal compliance. Then international standards, globally accepted practice like from ISO or ILO, you can select one related to your business and the information can be very valuable in the identification of the hazard. Then there are research and development bodies like NIOSH, whose sole work is to do development, research and development in occupational health and safety. So they provide the solutions, they identify the different factors, conditions. So their publications can be very helpful. Then there are manufacturers' manuals related to hazardous substances or the equipment. So related to hazardous substances, there are safety data sheets, and for the equipments or machinery, there are safety or technical manuals, which are valuable source of information. Then there are reports from the insurance companies as can be very valuable as the insurance companies are dealing with all types of industries. And every time they are going to engage with someone, so they do a very comprehensive assessment about the hazard and risk within the organization. So their reports can be very valuable. Then there are experts, third-party experts, HSE specialists, specialists in chemicals, health, or different fields. And there are auditors, experienced auditors. So they can be hired, their services can be hired to ensure that our all the hazards are identified. Then there are different publications related to health and safety magazines, like, so we can get the information from them. So these all sources can be very valuable in effective identification of the hazards. Next is method for hazard identification, techniques to identify the hazards. So there are too many methods or techniques we can adopt, from very simple to very complex and comprehensive. But which one is suitable for us depends upon the scope of our risk assessment process and the types of activities and processes we are going to assess. So let's start with very simple one. So simply you can ask your employees or workers about the hazards, doing a walkthrough survey. You can get their feedback as they are the one who are doing the or executing the jobs or the activities, so are in good position. Then you can do the brainstorming with your team. You can sit together, then you can discuss different ideas and you can identify the potential hazards. Then you can use a checklist which are pre-existing or developed checklists in which hazards are already mentioned, so you can get benefit from them. Then you can go to the site and physically observe the hazard, doing a walkthrough, doing a workplace tour or inspection. You can accompany with your staff or any specialist which may help you. Then you can conduct the safety, you can get the help from the safety audits previously conducted within your organization. So their findings can be very helpful. Then you can do the benchmarking with similar industry. You can compare your performance with them. You can compare, you can your practices with their practices. So you can get some benefits or good information or ideas about the hazard from them. Then there are other structured techniques like JSA, JHA hazard and stuff. And now let's we discuss them. In more sophisticated and structured approaches, better structured approaches, here comes hazard and operability study. We call it hazard. This is basically your experts sit together, they analyze your system or process, and they identify the potential circumstances or conditions under which your process may deviate from the intended operation, and they identify the potential impacts or consequences. Then there is a failure mode and effects analysis, basically related to engineering and design, in which your experts sit together, they analyze your system and process, and they identify the potential segments that may fail during the operations and what may be the consequences. Then there is a what if analysis, in which brainstorming technique, experts sit together, discuss the idea about the system or process, and then they try to identify potential hazards. Then there is a fault tree analysis, basically in which top to down technique to identify the root causes. Then event tree analysis, in which basically experts sit together and they identify the sequence of the events that may lead to the hazardous event. So these are the some techniques we can use for the hazard identification. Why do we may fail to address some hazards? Another thought-provoking question. You can test your current knowledge. You may stop the video and think of the answer. Why may we miss some hazard during this assessment process? So there are some factors that contribute to this. Not immediately apparent, those hazards we cannot feel using our senses like see, sight, smell, taste, etc. So like carbon monoxide gas radiations, we can miss them. Then those hazards whose effects appear after very long periods of time, like chronic diseases, cancers, etc. Then there are hazards who may go unreported. Maybe the employee left the organizations after the chronic illness appeared to him, or other unreported hazards. So these are the factors that contribute to missing our hazards. So how we can make sure that we don't miss them? So obviously organizations have to develop a good understanding about those hazards who are present within the organization but not immediately apparent. Then those hazards which may cause the chronic illness or diseases. So organizations should have a good understanding of those. Then reporting mechanism should be so effective that no hazard should go unreported. Which hazards take longer to materialize? Another thought-provoking question. You can test your knowledge, stop the video, think of the answer. Which are the hazards that may take very long periods of time before they materialize? So they include health hazards, chronic illness diseases, carcinogens causes the cancer, which take very long periods of time before they materialize. Then respiratory diseases due to dust, fumes, airborne. Similarly, musculoskeletal disorders, muscles and joint issues due to exposure to vibrations or repetitive tasks or poor manual handling techniques.
Then environmental hazards may take very long periods of time before they materialize, like climate change, soil water contamination. Similarly, physical hazards include structural damage to the equipment body, wear and tear within the body, fatigue. So they may take very long periods of time before they materialize. Similarly, geological hazards, landslides, etc. How to control them? uh, we control these, we identify these hazards and effectively control by a continuous improvement process. So, what is it? So, have to develop ongoing monitoring process. We have to develop maintenance procedures and implement control measures. Then we have to review them. We evaluate our performance. We find the area of improvements and gaps, then we make new action plans, we implement them, then we start monitoring again. So this way, this cycle continues, and with the passage of time, our system becomes so mature or so effective that we effectively identify and control these hazards. Let's do a small exercise, practice hazard identification. Name construction site hazards and how they may harm you. So you can test your knowledge, stop the video, think of as many construction site hazards as you can. So the common hazards at the construction sites are basically falls from the height, you are using ladders, scaffold, other platforms, moving vehicles, cars, trucks, heavy equipment like cranes, excavators, forklifts, etc. Falling objects from the working at height platforms or rolling stone in the excavation or maybe the loads you are lifting. Different chemicals you are using, petrol, diesel, or other paints, etc. Slip strips hazard very common due to poor housekeeping, maybe. Then lot of manual handlings are involved in the construction site. Then fire hazards come due to the combustibles or flammables material. Then high noise may be due to the power tools or the heavy equipment. Now, how they may harm you? So you can stop the video again, think of the few reasons. So they can harm you maybe because of the unstable platform, unstable ladder, or unstable scaffold or unprotected scaffold. Guardrails are not installed. Harness is not provided or weird. Then vehicle struck with scaffold. Vehicles can stuck with a structure or the pedestrian. No toe boards installed on the scaffold, so materials are falling down. Chemical spills can cause the harm. Then worker slips and falls maybe due to the spillage of the water or the chemical. Back pains due to the manual handling. Then fire, maybe smoking can be the reason, or hot works activities that we are doing there. Then due to the noise, temporary or permanent hearing loss. Let's do another exercise. Name hazards, office hazards, and how they may harm you. So in the offices, common hazards are slips and trips. Manual handling is involved there. Electricity hazard is there. Fire hazard may be there. Then display screen equipment hazard is there. Then cleaning chemicals are involved there, so they can harm you. Then work equipment like paper shredders, stapler, printers, etc. And then the stress may be due to the workload or the organizational culture. Then how they may harm you: worker slips of the spilled water, maybe or slippery floor, strains and sprains due to the manual handlings, and electricity may be overloaded, and the short circuit may cause a fire. Then due to the display screen equipment, if prolonged exposure to the display screens can lead to the musculoskeletal disorders. Then cleaning chemicals can cause contact with the skin can cause irritations like things. Then a finger can be crushed between the uh, paper shredder. Then the stress may lead to the anxiety and depression. Next topic is who may be harmed and how. Second step of the risk assessment, in which we have to assess who may be harmed due to the hazards we have identified. So these hazards may impact our employees, visitors, contractors, subcontractors, self-employed, guests visiting us, trespassers if there is a public in the surrounding, and the children may be there. Then some employees are at high risk, like lone workers. There should be no lone working, especially there is no first aid available to them and there is no supervision. Then those who are at a risk of the violence, maybe cash handler or the security personnel. Then young and elderly people are more prone to the hazards. Similarly, those with the disabilities, as they cannot react uh, effectively in the case of any emergency. Then how these hazards may harm. So maybe broken bones in form of cut injuries, muscle or joint damages like musculoskeletal disorders, maybe crushed behind a vehicle or maybe between two objects, electrocution, shock, burns, irritation, maybe contact with the chemicals. So there can be irritation or other impacts. Then health issues, illness, infections, musculoskeletal disorders, respiratory issues, or other chronic diseases. So we covered all the topics for today. Let's summarize them, what we learned today. So we started with the sources of information which can be valuable for us for the hazard identification. They are internal, external. Internally implies feedback, our history of the organization, incident, near misses, accident, investigation reports, monitoring data like inspections, audits, risk assessment, and maintenance record of our equipment. Then external sources are regulatory bodies, international standards relevant to our business, and we can hire some expert that can help us in identification of the hazard. Then we looked into the methods of hazard identification for simple to very complex one and sophisticated one. From the brainstorming, checklist, historical data, JSA, and method like hazard. Then we understood there are some hazards which are difficult to address due to some factors like we cannot feel them using our senses like sight, taste, or smell. And some hazards go unreported. Then we understood that there are some hazards which take very long periods of time before they get materialized. Then we look into the some construction site hazard like falling from height, electrocution, mechanical hazard. Then we looked into some of the office hazards, including the trippings, slip and trip hazards, and then electrocution, fire hazard, and the chemicals involved in the cleaning activities. So that was it for today. I hope this will be very helpful for you. Thank you very much for watching and supporting me. So see you in the next video with next topic. Until then, take care, stay safe and healthy. Allah Hafiz.